Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Tuesday topic. Today's topic is what the heck is SharePoint? Uh, and our presenters today are Brian Thomas, our Systems Administrator for CNHP IT, and Amanda Keen, the Associate Director for Health Professions, Diversity, and Student Affairs. Amanda, take it away.
Hi, welcome to What the Heck is SharePoint? I'm Amanda Keen, as Darren said. I'm the Associate Director of Health Professions, Student Affairs, and Diversity at CNHP. And with me is Brian Thomas.
I'm Brian Thomas. I'm the IT Systems Administrator for the College of Nursing. Good afternoon.
So today's agenda, we have, we're going to give a brief overview of some of the Microsoft 365 apps. We're going to do comparisons of app versus app. We're going to do some use case bracketology, provide some CNHP resources that are available in SharePoint and Teams and OneDrive, and then answer any questions.
So before I go through some of the history, a lot of the Microsoft technologies and a lot of the technology we talk about is kind of a blank slate that Microsoft gives you to build and develop your own solutions. So while you're watching this, think of certain aspects of the program that we talk about or certain features that might apply to something you're working on. Because the toolkit is very generic, but the applications can become very specific when it solves a business problem that you have. So how did we get here? Back in the Stone Age, we wrote things on stone tablets. Then cavemen invented the postal service, so we sent people letters, phone calls, email, and text messaging, going through to more modern technology. In the business world, there's still equivalents of somewhat archaic means, so to speak. They say if it's written on the internet, it's written in stone because it's always there. You can't take anything off the internet. So the modern corollaries, the stone tablets, or SharePoint, which is web-based websites for our business environment. Email is still a thing. I don't think email will ever go away. Our phones are slowly being replaced by Teams, and messages that used to be long form with salutation, body, summary, closure. People are just getting briefer in their communication. Steve Jobs wouldn't write an email that was more than 3 sentences. So messaging has converted to a much more modern, succinct, ideally, format.
So some of the Microsoft 365 apps or services that we're going to talk about today include OneDrive, which is a Microsoft cloud service that connects you to all of your files. It lets you store, protect your files, and share them with others and get to them from anywhere on any device. We'll also discuss SharePoint, which our organization uses to create kind of mini websites as well as file deposit areas. It's a secure place to store and organize and share and access information also from any device. We'll talk about Teams, and that includes Teams channels and Teams chat. They do actually function differently, even though it feels very similar. Microsoft Teams is a workspace for real-time collaboration and communication, meetings, file app sharing, and of course it has emojis and GIFs. And it's all in one place and also accessible on multiple devices. And we'll also see how these apps and services tie and work with Outlook. As many of you know, Outlook can be used to organize email as well as manage your calendar. And files can be shared either by attaching them or sharing them in the cloud.
So in addition to all these Microsoft services, Drexel as a university still has resources that are consistent. We still have our on-premise file servers that those of you that work with protected health information may be used to our encrypted file server, and even departmental data, student records, a lot of that lives on servers that are on campus. And in some cases, they still have a use. Microsoft, just because it's cloud-based and constantly updating, is not necessarily the best location for everything. Same goes for filing cabinets. You're going to have paper records, you're going to have consent forms. Paper's not going away either. CrashPlan as a software package backs up files on your computer and does a very different function than the services like OneDrive and SharePoint. And as much as I know people aren't supposed to use them, people do use flash drives because they are convenient, but they have their limitations. I've seen them go for a swim in the sink or a cup of coffee, and I've seen data disappear that way. So these services and storage locations don't get replaced entirely by Microsoft 365 and the various services, but they do have a very specific use case, and the next part of this presentation is geared towards helping you figure out what service you may want to use when. So getting into that, frequently your decision comes down to there are a couple of services that could solve your need, handle your problem, help you accomplish what you're trying to achieve. But there's subtle differences between them. When it comes down to it, a message in Teams and an email are just text that you can send to someone. But given what you're trying to accomplish, they may have benefits or disadvantages. So one thing with email is it's considered very formal. You send it, there are headers, the person received it, they opened it, all these records exist, and we often use email as the equivalent of put it in writing, so to speak. So it still has that official capacity, but because of that formality to it, people, I find, answer emails a lot slower than they would something like a message in Teams. So just as an example, comparing services, there's a distinct advantage to each. And in this case, it would be response time. So going into our first comparison of services, we have OneDrive and SharePoint. I didn't put this in writing, and I'm going to say it, but try not to dwell on it. OneDrive and SharePoint are the same web service. They just look a little different. So a SharePoint document library is the same as OneDrive. It functions the same. It can be used in the same fashion. There's only a very minor difference, but it's this difference that truly sets the services apart. OneDrive is tied specifically to your user account. So me, BRT32, has a OneDrive that stores all of my files. It's great for files that I only need, files I want to access from any device, anywhere. But it's a problem for a spreadsheet of vendor contacts that I have for our department if I ever leave the department, because I take those files with me, and if I leave Drexel, they get deleted. So SharePoint, which can function in the same way, is not tied to a user account. It's controlled by the university. It is more or less a system resource. It's owned by the servers, not by a particular individual. So files in SharePoint remain available even after someone leaves.
So our next services comparison is Microsoft Groups versus Microsoft Teams. Microsoft Groups, they automatically provide a shared mailbox, which is a nice functionality if that's how your group primarily shares information. And it also provides a shared document library. Oftentimes, groups are created and they also belong to a person. So if an individual creates a group and then they leave, unless they assign a co-owner or accessibility to another member of the group, that group then kind of stops serving its purpose because no one else can add it, edit, or update it. Microsoft Teams, on the other hand, it provides categorized channels for chatting. So if your group works on multiple projects, you can have a channel for each project to help organize your communications. It also provides a shared document library in Microsoft SharePoint. The nice thing about Teams is that you can edit your messages after they are sent. So if you have a small typo or information that you wanted to update before it kind of being saved, you're able to update it and edit your messages. It has easy to manage permissions, adding team members. And it also has a shared mailbox, but at Drexel, that mailbox is inactivated, but it can be reactivated by submitting a ticket to our IT team. And our last comparison is actually Teams chat versus Teams channel. I think most of my conversations are in team chat right now, but some of the long-term projects and ongoing conversations in that regard are used in the Teams channel. Teams chat documents are actually saved in your OneDrive. So the ownership of those documents remain with you. And as Brian had mentioned, if I were to leave, those documents come with me or get deleted if I leave. The nice thing about Teams chat is that you're able to chat with your individuals in small groups in a very timely fashion without sending in inundating our email boxes. The Teams channel, on the other hand, documents are saved in SharePoint and can be organized with files, which is something that I personally really appreciate. If you ever look at your files area in a chat, it's just every file that you've ever shared with those individuals. And there's no way to organize that information. In a Teams channel, you can manage your conversations with threads, which is really nice. So if you have a couple conversations about a bunch of different things going on, you can put your comments with each thread and organize them that way instead of trying to locate that thing that you said about that topic. Teams channel also provides private channels for more restricted conversations and files with smaller groups. Just to give you a quick image of what a thread looks like, as you can see, it starts with a conversation or a post by an individual, and then everyone can kind of respond to that one comment, and all of your conversations and feedback are stored in one conversation.
In the first case, the channel name is blue because someone tagged the channel, and what that does is it triggers a notification within Teams, and later on, you see individuals actually tagging other people. One benefit to this is if this were an old email thread, you'd have to read through the whole message where it said, Amanda, look at this. Darren, look at this. In Teams, when you tag someone, they get a notification and they can click that notification to see exactly where they were mentioned. They can go to their relevant section of the conversation and see why someone mentioned them, what's needed on their behalf. So this is one benefit of Teams over email. And just to summarize this thematically, much of what Teams is designed to do is give communication context. It gives areas where you can write information around documents. It gives the ability to tag people, the ability to notify people, and giving all this context of the communication is really why Teams has had such high adoption and such a wide use among businesses in the modern world. So, as I said, a lot of these are decisions that come down between different services and what is best to use when. So, we're getting into the March Madness time of the year, so we went with the sports-themed bracketology. So here's my first example. You're looking at something such as writing a report for your manager. To give a little bit of a subtext here, we're assuming that you're basically working on the report yourself with your own information. It's not a huge collaboration project. So in SharePoint, were you to create a SharePoint site for it, you get a whole web environment, you get a document library. But honestly, it's probably more than you need. In this case, OneDrive provides a lot of simplicity, and when you're done, you can simply share the file and be done with it. And if you found that you did have to collaborate with a few individuals later, you can share the document as needed And the sharing is an iterative process. You can add one person each time you share it, and it doesn't revoke any previous permissions.
So our second game would be working on a project with several team members. Our two, I guess, teams. The first one is a Teams channel, which would provide immediate communication, allow team members to collaborate, keep files together, easy for new members to catch up. And we put the easy for new members to catch up because without using like a Teams environment, if you add new members to your team or working group, you forward them all the emails, you make sure they have all of the documents that they need, and usually someone has to catch them up on any previous conversations or discussions, forwarding the previous minutes so that they can kind of get back to where the group is working. With Teams channels, if you add a new member to your group, they can go through and review all of the conversations. They can review them by the thread. So if your group is working on several different projects or have several discussions, they can look at all of those discussions grouped together in a way that's easy for them to follow, understand, and get caught up. Also, all of the group's files would be together and can easily be reviewed or organized so that an individual can be caught up. Outlook, I think, is how we do a lot of our group and teamwork at the moment. It provides immediate communication, which is great. A lot of people have it on their phones so that they can get that information immediately if appropriate. And it's really easy to attach files and share them rather as an attachment or even in the cloud. In this particular case, the Teams channel would win, largely because of the being able to add new members and easy for them to get caught up in information. And being able to organize your documents into one space for the whole team is always really helpful.
So in this case, we want to look at something that revolves around the ongoing operations of the college. So in this case, we use the example of starting a new committee. And this is where we sort of see the biggest hurdle in terms of providing consistency across all of the college's different operational units. And even the university as a whole struggles with this. When it was just the file servers and SharePoint, they were all university resources. There was really no individual ownership or control. When we got into 365, it's great now. You guys can form teams on your own. You can build your own content. The problem is there's no overarching organization to the way environments are set up. So I know certain departments, I'm going to call them out without any intention of shaming them, but just because I know they use the environments well. Nurse anesthesia and physical therapy, rehab sciences, they use Teams to organize a lot of their communication. And that's well and good as long as someone is actively there to manage the group, manage membership, and make sure there's a succession plan, not succeeding. You have to stay in the college, sorry. There's a plan for change of roles, new hires, departures. And in the olden days, before 365, that would all be centrally managed by IT. In the cases of departments that are doing well, they can manage their own teams, they control their own data, and everything's fine. The concern becomes, what happens if you're not quite sure what you're doing and you build a solution that may work for your faculty and staff now, but come an employee change, there's no person to kind of help migrate through those changes and move into the new environment. So in this case, a team may be applicable for the committee, and I certainly believe that there would be a point to forming a Microsoft team for the committee, but for the sake of the college and the operational data, SharePoint needs to be something that's considered for the end product. You guys can have all your meetings in Teams, you can coordinate on documents in Teams, but there should be some dedicated space within university resources for the committee to store information, to store bylaws and formal documents and all of that. So, next slide. So in this case, Teams is definitely better than OneDrive because Teams will give the committee immediate communication, the ability to collaborate. It does include a SharePoint site, but it is a Teams SharePoint site, which means you have to be a member of the team to see it. And with access to that site also comes access to the chats and conversations and all of that. So I still recommend for more permanent placement for files and information that it ends up in SharePoint, but having a fully dedicated Microsoft team to your committee is much better than having the files in the committee chair's OneDrive and they have all the meeting minutes and then they move on. And now your committee has no record of meetings over the past several years.
And then just to follow up with that, some of the things that we've done with our new committees is we started with the team, and we've opened up the SharePoint site that's associated with that team to the entire college, while creating also a private space for committee documents. And a lot of the committee documents, with our updated CNHP bylaws, a lot of them are still being posted and should be viewable and accessible to all of the faculty and professional staff. So we've been able to open up some of our previously private SharePoint sites, open them up to the college community as a whole, while still creating some private areas for committee members only. Okay, next. So some tips and tricks about working in Microsoft Teams and SharePoint and OneDrive. When you are working on a document that's shared with you in Teams or OneDrive or SharePoint, you can open it by using the desktop application. All of the documents, when you open them up to the top of the document, you'll see an opportunity to click on that to open the desktop application, which is a really nice option because then you get the full functionality of Microsoft Word, Microsoft Excel, or any PowerPoint, anything that you're using, you get the full functionality instead of having to kind of work in that either browser window or Teams window, which always kind of, sometimes it hides things if it's in the margins or in the background. So it's really nice to be able to open up the full document and see all of the revisions or images that might be included. Another nice opportunity is syncing your files. Both Teams and SharePoint and OneDrive all give you the opportunity to sync your files so that you don't have to necessarily go into each of those environments to access your documents. If you sync them with your files, you can open them up on your computer the same way you would open up your files normally. And there's a file right on the side with the documents that you use. I do that a lot with some of the teams that I use when I do a lot of mail merges or create a lot of letters that need to be shared with someone else or in a common space. I store a lot of them and sync them with my files so that I can access them all the time without necessarily having to go into that team or chat. Another tip and trick is file comments. When you use documents that are in Teams, OneDrive, or SharePoint, you can add comments to the other team members just by writing a comment in the side, and it actually gives them a notification that a comment has been added. If you use that @ functionality by using the @ symbol and the person's name, they'll be notified that you wrote a comment to them that they need to address, which is really nice. Also, all of these documents have version history saved. Up to 500 versions of a document can be saved, and you can revert back to that file version at any time. You can go back and switch to a previous version, or you can just see what the previous versions looked like. So you never have to worry about kind of losing what you were working on along the way.
And before I get into this, I just want to go on another point with the tips and tricks. A lot of the As I said, a lot of it gives communication and information context. And as we've learned over the past, pandemic feels like it's been going for a decade now, but the evolution of work during the pandemic and the fact that we're not all sitting at our desks 8 to 5, our hours are changing. We're dealing with different schedules to support our own lives that have been disrupted via the pandemic. Giving context to this communication allows asynchronous work to perform a lot better than it used to. Used to be you had to go specifically find someone to talk about a document. But now, because you can tag the exact sentence you want them to look at and reevaluate, you can point them exactly where you want them. And you know that when they go to read that comment, they're going to see exactly where you are. You don't have to have some long-winded discussion, and you don't have to have an active discussion with the person. It can happen asynchronously. So I know as the pandemic has rolled through and everyone's schedules have changed, we've had to adapt to a much more asynchronous style of work. It's harder to get someone on the phone, but it's a lot easier to tag someone and send a message. And with all these communications in Teams, you also have the ability of, the same way you do with email, normal, high priority, you can do the same thing in Teams with messages and give them different categorizations. So it gives you a lot more freedom, or at least I feel a lot more freedom to manage your time as you see fit and to deal with working at odd schedules, odd times. So I just wanted to throw that in there at that point. So the university does have a bunch of SharePoint resources, and there are links in this presentation that we can send out. But the one warning I want to give you about SharePoint is it's harder to find things now than it used to be with our old SharePoint servers that ran in Corman. They were all structured. There was a very hierarchical nature of the university server, then down into the colleges and various departments. In Microsoft 365, everything is it's flat. Everyone gets their own SharePoint site off wherever they want it. It's hard to balance a lot of cohesion, and Amanda will touch on some of what we've done in CNHP to develop cohesion and give a structured environment to the information to hopefully make it easier for you to find. But there are a few resources out there that you can search for, either by going to SharePoint and just typing in the search bar, or using the links on these slides when we send them out. But Faculty Senate has a decent site. There are a couple sites, the Office 365 Power User Group and the Office 365 training site maintained by DUIT that really give you a lot more tips and tricks than we've given you here. And they're constantly updating because Microsoft is constantly releasing new features. Also, University Communications uses it for university logos and typesets. And then if you're a Drexel parent like me, you may be in the Drexel Parents team. That's nice. And it's work themed because it's a Drexel owned channel, but quite honestly, it is just a special interest group of parents that work for Drexel University. So you'll find resources in there for managing the pandemic. People will be looking for childcare or childcare ideas, and it's a free exchange of information that can be both helpful personally and on a professional level through the university, because it's an opportunity to connect with your colleagues that you share a commonality with, even if you work on entirely different campuses. And then finally, the instructional technology blog has really been built up during the pandemic to help support faculty who are now adjusting to teaching in a remote setting or a hybrid setting, and really trying to give them the resources to maintain a standard of instruction that some people feel we lost when we moved to the pandemic.
And then, as Brian had mentioned, CNHP has put together many SharePoint and Teams resources for our community. The best, and as you mentioned, we tried to put everything into one cohesive spot, and that spot is the CNHP SharePoint site. In a minute, I'm going to show you how to go to and find it. On that SharePoint site, it has the Dean's Office of Work Groups, which has a lot of information. It has our town hall recordings, it has meeting minutes. The Faculty Affairs has a SharePoint site, as well as the Faculty Affairs Committee. Our Student Services team has a SharePoint site with policies and procedures for students. And we just launched our Student Toolkit, which is a one-stop shop for student resources that they can need throughout their time at Drexel, whether it be where to find dining halls, or how to submit a withdrawal form or appeal a grade. All of those resources for them are all in one spot. Our CNHP research team maintains a SharePoint site with a lot of updated information. There are building updates with the health science building, including pictures and PowerPoints and floor plans. Our leave request app that our CNHP IT team put together, that can be found on our SharePoint site. Our room scheduling tool for all of the rooms in Parkway is in there, as well as a directory of faculty and professional staff. As far as team resources, we do have a staff community forum that has a corresponding SharePoint site. One of the things that I like about the staff forum is that it has CNHP service alerts. So anytime a system goes down or something is unavailable, there's a nice alert that we receive to let us know. If you'd like to find our SharePoint site, one quick and easy way to do it is if you go to the Daily Dose site and click, there's a nice yellow bar right on the side. If you click on that, it's our CNHP SharePoint site. I don't know, can you guys see that? Okay. Yeah,
Yep.
okay. So this is our CNHP SharePoint environment. It has the weather, it has the COVID response updates and links. Here is where you can access the Drexel Health Sciences building updates. These are all of the main kind of hubs of information that are available. We have the Office of the Dean, Administrative Departments, Nursing and Student Affairs, Health Professions and Faculty Affairs, Office of Research, Continuing Education, CNHP Student Services, Faculty Affairs, and Interprofessional Research and Development. And all of these spaces are routinely updated with information. We also have IT announcements, which cover some of those alerts and outages that I mentioned before. We have the CNHP contact directory, and this is something that can be maintained by each department. One person in each department is able to update the information. We have the CNHP leave request app for all faculty and professional staff. We have news updates that are culled together from all of our SharePoint sites that provide news updates. So you can see that they're from CNHP Research, Student Services, and our Board of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. We have additional resources available in one spot as well, with policies, resource links, the employee handbook, the staff community forum. We have a staff council page, and as well as a link to our CNHP website. As you can see right now, we don't have any outages, which is always nice to see that green check mark. And this is also the space where you can go in to reserve a room at Parkway. And I was just told that room 639 is back online, so we can go back in and start using that again. We also have access to all of the standing committees have SharePoint sites. And it's updated with committee minutes. If it comes online, it should be updated with committee minutes. Our Academic Affairs Committee has, this is a great site that Darren maintains. It has updates, it has policies, best practices, an explanation of the services, the committee members. All of that can be found in one spot. We have promotion committees are on here. So this is really a great one-stop shop for information about our college and resources. And if it's not there, let us know and we'll find a place that we can update it, because we really want it to be a great resource for the entire college to use.
So as you can see from a lot of this, you get out of it what you build. And what you have an interest in building may vary depending on your role. The Microsoft 365 services go a lot more in depth than SharePoint. You get something called Power Automate, which is designed to automate business processes like approvals or document review or something that has multiple steps. And by figuring out the logic behind it, you can find a way to automate the process electronically. So one benefit to these tools is they all can tie into that automate system, and you can build something that really makes your job easier. There's a bit of a learning curve to get into SharePoint, to get really into some of these tools. But the end result, once you understand them, is you have the ability to really make your life easier by automating certain tasks that just take a lot of your time. And once you understand how they're supposed to work, the technology can be used to streamline the process and make your life overall a lot easier. So we wanted to end the presentation with enough time just to give anyone an opportunity for questions, either about anything we've shown you or anything you have an interest in doing, or whether we think something might even be possible or not. Because quite frankly, a lot of the items that have started in SharePoint started with, can we use SharePoint to do this? Can we use OneDrive to do this? And almost always the answer is yes, it can be done once you figure out the components in the various services that you need to put something together. So we'll open the floor for questions.
Hi.
Kathy.
First of all, that was an excellent presentation, Brian, Amanda. It was really helpful to me because it clarified. And I love March Madness, go Orange. And so that was great. Okay, my question is, I was actually in SharePoint, CNHP SharePoint today, and I was exploring, and I clicked on my division, which is nursing, and it has Kim Montgomery's photograph, and I think it was blank when I clicked on it. So does it sometimes, and I'm at home right now, my home office, does it take time to load up?
I mean, you just saw that it took a minute kind of there for me to load up the divisions. So it's always possible. Sometimes it takes a little bit longer. If you refresh, there shouldn't be too much of delay. But Brian, what do you think?
Yeah, there's occasionally a delay. The way SharePoint works, it's a global computer network, and it's not the fastest, it's not instantaneous. So sometimes you do have to refresh. And Amanda's right, when you go to the division pages, those pages are set to essentially look at everything attached for them and aggregate it up on the fly and show you that listing. And sometimes the page shows up before the computers have time to get everything together to appear. So usually refreshing will fix the problem. If it's something that happens repeatedly, it may be more of a computer issue that we can look at in terms of it's just not querying the server for the newest data every time you load the page.
Brian's often told me to stop clicking and be patient. So I've definitely had my fair share of having to wait. But there is a lot of information in the nursing division and student affairs. So maybe give it another visit. Any other questions about CNHP resources or other resources? Hi,
I
Gloria.
have one. Hi. Yes, the presentation was great. Thank you so much. Helps with that decision-making process. My question is, I do always have trouble finding, like someone will send me an email and they've shared a SharePoint file with me. If I don't save that email, I don't know how to get back to that file. And then the same thing when I'm sharing something with someone, I don't know how to get back to it in SharePoint. So I'm technologically challenged in that respect. Can you give me any pointers?
Sure.
Sure. So in OneDrive on the web, when you go there from the Office portal, the left sidebar has your name and then a few subheadings. It should have My Files, Recent, Shared, and Recycle Bin. If you look in Shared, it has two categories, things that are shared with you and things that are shared by you. Quite frequently, if you look in there, it's a quick way to find something you're looking for. I wish I could say 100% of the time something shared with you will appear in there.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, it doesn't. But I often find that, especially with the new building, I get shared folders of different floor plans, folders from the AV contractor, folders from our simulation vendor. I have all these folders that have been shared with me, and I usually find myself going into that shared with me section to find folders that someone sent me, so that I can go through and look for.
So I'm supposed to be in SharePoint?
This would be, so are you saying a file that was shared with you from
Via
OneDrive or from SharePoint itself?
You know yeah, I think it's SharePoint.
Okay. So in that
SharePoint
case,
does have the search function at the top. So if you go to that CNHP site that we were showing you, at the top there should be a search bar.
Yeah.
And that should search all of the documents that you have access to. Is that right, Brian?
Oh. Go to Files.
Here, I'll share this.
Oh, yeah.
So if you go right to the top, up here, you should be able to search. That should cover all of your documents that you have access to, but it won't give you access to documents you don't have access to. So if someone gave you permission to view it in SharePoint, you should be able to search for it.
Okay, I see a lot of different things here, and I think that this is probably where I'm going to find. Yep. All right. Thank you very much.
Is that the same as if you go into office.com and do the shared, right? So will they be all the same files all the time?
So the way search works in any of the Microsoft services, be it Outlook on the web, SharePoint, OneDrive, the search algorithm spans all the different services and servers. So when you see that search bar at the top center of your screen, pretty much any Office or Microsoft 365 service on the web, that search box will often give you an entry point to any kind of global search. So if you're in SharePoint and you type in a file and it happens to be in your OneDrive, it'll still come up, or it should come up in those results. So that global search can be pretty powerful. And as Amanda said, it'll only show you documents you have access to. So it becomes more problematic for someone like me when I administrate a bunch of SharePoint sites. And if I search for meeting minutes, I'm going to hit every committee meeting minutes ever published for the entire college since the dawn of time. So your search, if you're a little more limited in your permissions and can only see certain things, it'll be a little more helpful. And the other thing you can do is you can drill down into the specific site you're searching for, and it should give you an option when you begin to search whether you want to search just this site or whether you want to expand it globally.
And then just
Okay.
to follow up with what Brian was saying, I think the question I get a lot is, I searched for this job description, it came up. Does that mean everybody can see it in SharePoint? And no, it's really to show you're getting that as a search result because you have access to it. If I searched for the same exact thing, it doesn't mean I would have access to it. But I think a lot of people see SharePoint and they're like, it's out there, the whole world can see it. But with the permissions in place, a lot of times it's still private to you or to whomever you shared it with. Um, just because it's coming up as a search doesn't mean that everybody can see it.
Thank you.
Mhm.
And now I see the difference between OneDrive and SharePoint and how the different files are in their different places. So I think sometimes I was looking for files in one when it was really in the other, because it even tells me who shared it with me. So this is exciting. Thank you.
I was just going to say too, if you office.com now, it has a new way where you can also search by people so that you can see, if I want to see something that Brian Thomas sent me, it's got a little block that says Brian Thomas and everything that he sent me is in that block. Although Brian, you didn't send me anything, so I guess that was a bad example, but Ben did.
Yeah,
So
it's all integrated. So if you're in Outlook and you search for someone specifically, and you click on their profile, you'll see, Amanda, did you just want to do a screen share and go into Outlook and find me?
Hold on. In the web browser or my Outlook?
Web browser would probably be best.
Because I was looking at my files to look up what Helene was doing, but I didn't know what files I had visible, so I wanted to check. So hold on.
Yeah, it's always fun. Microsoft, a lot of these algorithms that show you files and show you content are scarily the same things that drive Facebook and Twitter and all these social media algorithms, but they're now being applied to a business environment. So it's trying to show you content that it thinks you want to interact with.
Okay. I see what you're asking me to share.
Yeah. So from Outlook on the web, yeah, if you put in my name, and then it shows recent emails, but then clicking on my name gives a lot of, again, context of the communication, how to reach me, who my manager is, who I work with. And then the lower sections are files that Amanda and I have traded, emails, and you can click in any of those sections to expand more files that we've shared, more email chains. And you can do the same thing within groups. So if you search for a group in that field as opposed to a person, you can see a lot of that group activity in the same area. So Microsoft has really done a lot to allow you to click through anything that comes up and get more details on the interaction or the relationship, so to speak, that you have with that person in the business environment.
Here, I have a group.
Excuse me. Oh, sorry. Just quick question. Is there a way to access this then from your Outlook when you open up your Outlook? Because I missed that.
Sure.
So some of the features are available through the desktop app, and some of them aren't. So Outlook for Windows, at least, will tell me contact information and organizational structure, but it won't give me that OneDrive file sharing back and forth that I only see on the web. So the mileage varies depending on your application of choice, whether you go through the web or the actual installable version of Outlook on your computer. And for OneDrive, at least in general, I find OneDrive and SharePoint are much more web-based. So a lot of the context really only comes through in the web version of those apps.
I opened my Outlook, so this is what it would look like in the desktop version of Outlook. So compared to what we saw with Brian's profile when I opened it in the web browser version, this still has his contact information, his manager, and who he works with, but it doesn't show the files, which is what he was mentioning before, or previous communications.
And Teams has similar search functionality as well. Within Teams, you can search. And Teams, because it's a more modern product, Teams does a better job of pulling in a lot more of that information from the other web services, so to speak. Microsoft has really invested heavily in Teams to try and dominate the business market over the past few years.
And Teams has a lot of access to some of the other, they call it apps, like our phone apps, but apps that Microsoft has, like Planner and To Do. A lot of approvals can run through Teams, which is really nice. Calendars, meetings. You can submit, like we've submitted documents for approvals through Teams, or we've actually submitted coursework for a CNHP or for an IT course through Teams, and it gives you kind of a grade book as well. So there's a lot of, there's a lot to kind of click through and trial and error, but there's a lot that also can be connected with Teams as well.
Okay.
But it would be a lot, and you guys would be super bored if we clicked through all of them. Going through office.com is another great way to go through SharePoint. But if you just want to find that CNHP spot to kind of get reoriented to what's available, that's a really great way to do it.
Believes that you'll only ever know 2 of 3 things. You'll either know the file name, who sent it to you, or what was in it. You can only pick 2, but they've designed their search assuming that if you can get 2, they'll help you get to the file.
Thank you both for your great explanations and great PowerPoint slide deck. One little trick that I like to use when I'm navigating SharePoint sites, if you ever are on SharePoint, you'll notice in the upper right-hand corner, there's a little star that says following, not following. If you punch that star, and then when you're navigating through SharePoint, it'll like collect those things together for you. So like if you click the little star, it'll sort of be in your little subset of SharePoint sites that you follow. And it actually brings that up at the top of your Drexel SharePoint page when you're on that page in the Office 365 environment.
The following is helpful just because there have been some sites that I only know how to find if I go into the sites that I follow, because I found it once and I said, I'm never going to find it again. So mark it now while I have it. And that's a convenient entry point to save it. And since it's in the web browser and it's saved by Microsoft, I don't have to worry which computer I'm on. It's always there. And it understands, it tells Microsoft that site is important to me. So as it aggregates news and files, it'll show me things that I'm following over something I'm not. So it prioritizes that indication.
All right. Well, thank you all so much. And thank you, Amanda. Thank you, Brian. Great job. We'll see you guys next time at Tuesday Topics next week.